Hello and welcome to episode 30? Yes, that's right. Episode 30. Okay, but wait, we're already at episode 30? Get me out of this trap. I feel like I'm anti-claustrophobic. I have no idea where I was going with that, but I blame Mr. Scott Reacts for that because he started that joke in the Minecraft series that we do, but beside the point. Yes, it's episode 30 of the Horsemen podcast. Wow, a year and a half, and we're up to episode 30, and more to come, very much. But today's episode, oh boy, it's gonna get downright bloody, evil, and satanic. Norwegian black metal. But of course I'm not alone, joined by the usual crew. Right above me, for once, someone that's not one to kill me, is Raphael Fireblade. Then over on the far top left is our favorite woman from Germany. Her specialty is here today, and that's Hannah Klein.
Bonjour.
And then right underneath of her is none other than Horror Master Ricky Karaman.
Hello. Oh fuck!
You
can't
need to work on that, sir. You good? You just need to work on it.
And if I didn't have a head cold, I'd be able to do it better, but I can't quite. And for those wondering, no, I am not infected with the virus. I just had a head cold because of a temperature changeover. Don't have a fever, none of that crap. And then last but certainly not least, a man whose camera is still loading, sadly, is our favorite handsome feller from Portugal, Artur Castanha.
I'm still here, and I'm quarantined, and my vein is cut.
But anyways, we're not here to talk about the bad stuff because we're getting through it sometime. Nonetheless, it's time to talk Norwegian black metal. But questions may be asked. What was inspirational for Norwegian black metal? What is Norwegian black metal? Who are the key bands? What are the key albums? All the stories of, well, you know what.
Not just Norwegian black metal, but a bit of black metal in general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think a good, safe place to begin would be what was inspirational to black metal in general back in the 80s. Well, many of us can agree that the proto-black metal bands, the big three of proto-black, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, and Venom, were highly inspirational on the genre, especially Venom.
I usually, when I do those lists, I tend to put Hellhammer and Celtic Frost kind of the same because they were both the same members in a way.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But not to disagree, I tend to those two, and to an extent, Merciful Fate.
Yeah, especially the Corpse Pain.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
The whole aesthetics.
And you would talk about Corpse Pain, we have to bring up Sarcophagus as well, all the way from Brazil.
Yeah. Or even the precursors to corpse paint, like Alice Cooper and such. The precursors to it. But if we're talking,
I hate to bring it on this show, but maybe Kiss, because they were the ones
that
whole black and white.
Just imagine a black metal version of "I Was Made for Loving You."
Oh god, no! Oh yeah, no! They'll probably change to "I Was Made for Killing You."
Let me put it like this: delete.
But if we're talking about musically speaking, there are so many influences on black metal in general.
Yeah,
you had
Bathory.
you had, as far as like the precursors to black metal that were inspirational for creating the sound. Yeah, Venom, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, Sodom, Creator, early Slayer.
Merciful Fate.
Merciful Fate, not so much.
Merciful Fate. I mean, they mostly just focus on the
Blasphemy?
corpse paint.
Yeah, the lyrics in the Corpse
Anything.
Paint were essential. Musically, I don't consider them important
Nope.
musically to black metal.
Very, very little.
Yeah. But, yeah, and then, of course, Possessed arguably was inspirational on black metal, especially the aesthetic with Seven Churches with the cover and the burning cross on the back. Even though they were more inspirational on death metal, a lot of black metal bands were inspired by Possessed. Like Samael, for example, were highly inspired by Possessed back in their early years. Yeah, there were countless influences out there to what eventually became black metal. Now, what is black metal? Well, if I had to put it in simple, short term, it would be the combination, in my mind, of new wave of British heavy metal, thrash, punk, and early death metal. To some extent. I would say those are the four key ingredients of what helped to create early black metal. And when I'm meaning early black metal, we're talking about the bands that were properly black metal from the 80s, mainly Bathory, early Sarcophago, and even others that kind of... What?
Venom, to a certain extent. I mean, Venom had a little bit of that. It had a little bit of thrash. It had a little bit... They were mostly speed. They were not considered that all thrash, but...
True.
Along with Merciful Fate, who were starting that whole... Not just Merciful Fate, but also even going before it to Black Widows and Black Sabbath. Yes, they were doing satanic lyrics. Don't disagree. Don't.
True.
Yeah.
If you don't know, go check it out. What is Black Sabbath? What does Black Sabbath really mean? But I mean, Black Widows, Black Sabbath, they were already starting that whole satanic imagery. Then it came a bit more theatrical with King Diamond and Merciful Fate's band. But Venom, they were bringing in the speeds that would later become part of thrash metal. And I mean, what can you say about the lyrical theme? At War with Satan, Welcome to Hell, Countess Bathory, the band that gave the term black metal.
Yep.
And made an album called Black Metal.
Yep.
Welcome to hell.
And then even before Venom, there was a demo called Black Metal Masters by German thrash band Holy Moses back in 1980, I believe. So even before Venom, black metal was kind of a term. I just remembered that. But yeah, as far as like the key bands at the early stages of black metal and what we would call the first wave, from about 1984 till about 1991, I would say the key bands in that era would be, of course, Bathory being the big one, early Sarcophago, mainly INRI. After that, they became more death metal. Early Samael.
Especially worship him. But although I don't disagree with what you said, but to me, I kind of consider Bathory an in-betweener. Yes, they were first wave, but they also influenced what would become the second wave of black. So I kind of put them first and second wave at the same time in terms of...
Yeah.
And even
I think they were the initiators for the whole second scene to really start and pick up movement. I mean, if you listen to early Bathory and compare it to like early Mayhem or early Dark Throne, I mean, it's, you hear where everything's coming from, basically.
Yep.
True.
Other key bands you could call from the first wave that had an element of black metal or were black metal, even like Master's Hammer was one. Bulldozer. Bulldozer was like the Italian Venom to some extent, I would say.
Blasphemy. I think it's an American band. Blasphemy.
Canadian. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Even though you could also argue that they were also closer to death metal as well, or one of the first blackened death bands, or war metal as some people call them, which I don't think is a real genre anyways.
Also, the band Profanica. I mean, you gotta give them the
Profanatica,
credit.
yeah.
Profanatica, an American band. I think from out of New York, started like in the
One of the
late.
worst live bands I have ever seen.
They probably do it on purpose.
They were supporting Rotting Christ and Watain. I was so happy when they finally left.
At least Watain and Rotting Christ are excellent live.
Yeah, but
I agree.
Profanatica
I saw
was
Watain.
dreadful.
Oh god.
But I would say that those were the most important first wave or early black metal bands. Even some people would call Sadistic Execution black metal. I say they're more death metal, kind of like Blasphemy.
I mean,
And they're an
the thing is,
Australian
a lot of-
band.
I would add Celtic Frost to that. I would add Celtic Frost.
I mean,
Celtic
a lot
Frost
of
we
death
could
metal
go on
bands
and
were
on
very
about
important
because
for lots of the black metal bands, because lots of the early Norwegian black metal bands started out as death metal bands, or at least members of them were parts of death metal bands before switching to this more simplistic, raw
Throne.
black metal style. Yeah, Mayhem.
Yeah.
And one other characteristic of black metal, if we talk now about the guitars, the drums, and also the vocals, I think it was a YouTuber, Razorfist, that said it best. If the singer is the Cookie Monster, that is death metal. If the singer is one of the 9 Nazgul, the Ring Greats, it's black.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with guitars and black metal, tons of tremolo picking, even though that was created at first in thrash. Death metal kind of also perfected it, but black metal took it to the
True.
nth degree as far as most of the riffs you hear. A lot of single note riffs, a lot. Not so much power chords. Drums, you get more of like you get blast beats, but more not in like the grindcore death metal way where it's so fast. It's more like the. Well, there are exceptions, like Hellhammer could play the death metal grindcore blasts within black metal, and among other drummers.
Frost as well.
Yeah, but the blast beats in black metal are a little bit slower and a little more kind of almost thrashy, unlike death metal or grindcore whenever they blast. But yeah, those are some musical characteristics I think we could all agree upon for what black metal is. But now, let's talk about what happened after the first wave ended, like the transition period from like 91 into like say 93 or something like that, when the Norwegian bands, which is the main topic of the episode, about how the Norwegian bands picked up on the early proto stuff and the first wave stuff in order to create their own niche in the scene of black metal.
One word: tape trading. Something that we don't have to. Tape trading.
Yep.
Yep.
And of course, Norway being the next door neighbor to Sweden, and of course Sweden was the home of, in our minds, the first true black metal band, Bathory. And also you had Pella Olin, or Dead, from Morbid, coming over to Norway to join Mayhem at the end of the 80s.
And another character named He Who Shall Not Be Named, with 2 V. Varg Vikernes.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Recorders.
Oh, Grishnak.
Griefy Grishnak. But I would say, as far as how the second wave started,
Also, I forgot to mention that if you look to some of the names, and I think I saw on Loudwire Hansi Kirsch and John Schaefer talking about it. Which books are most metal? A lot of Lord of the Rings influence in black metal. I mean, you have bands that literally they took regions from Lord of the Rings and they made it themselves. You have Minas Ithil, you have Karakangren, which is one of the more newer ones. You have Isengard as well, black folk projects as well.
Walls of Rauros.
Exactly, summoning that did a lot of their songs inspired on Lord of the Rings settings as well. Even some of the names.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So back on to like how the second wave really got their sound. Some metalheads or journalists within metal like to pinpoint the way the second wave bands got their sound as a reaction against the Florida death metal and the Swedish death metal sounds because they felt, oh, death metal's losing its edge, or talking about political stuff and wearing shorts and colored clothes instead of being all about death. I'm gonna go on the record right now and say, for me, I was always more of a Florida death metal fan than anything during the early 90s, even though I was born in 94, but going back and discovering all this stuff, I was always more of a death metal fan than a black metal fan because I personally felt death metal had more to offer musically and sound-wise. Because at the end of the day, I like to hear something that sounds good and not something that sounds shitty. There are bands that could pull the shitty sound off very well, like many of the bands we're going to talk about in the Norwegian scene, but I can get where they were coming from. Particularly, their rebellion was mostly against Chuck Schuldiner and death, with how they went from gore, death lyrics to being more about...
Allow me to correct you. It wasn't against Chuck Schuldiner. It was against Scott Burns. If you see some of the early images or early promo images that they had of Death Like Silence, the record label that was started
Anti-Mosh.
by Anti-Mosh. Yes, it was anti-mosh, anti-core, anti-fun, and what they had was a stop sign, a forbidden sign as well. A forbidden sign. And on the picture, there was Scott Burns. It wasn't so much against Chuck Schuldiner and the death metal scene, it was against mostly Scott Burns.
Which I will say, I mean, yeah, Scott was the trendy producer for the Florida bands at the time. But that's just because, in my mind, he's, in my opinion, arguably the greatest producer in extreme metal history because he was able to bring the best out of all those bands in the late 80s through to the late 90s. And that's why Scott Burns is arguably my favorite producer in metal history, even if the black metal bands didn't like him because, well, yeah, he was the go-to guy for a lot of these bands. But at the same token, I would ask these bands, if you're trying to get the best sounding album you can in analog era recording, this was way before, well, no, digital recording was starting to come around, but very few bands decided to go that direction, Broken Hope being one of them. But when you're still in the era of analog production, you want to be able to get the best sounding album possible. You want to go to whoever can do it the best. You don't want to go to somebody who's going to do a half-assed job at it. But at the same time, yeah, I get they wanted to have the music sound more old school and a little more primitive sounding, which I could understand. I will say it definitely adds character to the music. I will not ever dispute that. But just from my perspective, I prefer to listen to something that's listenable rather than something that sounds like garbage, even if some bands can pull it off pretty well. But yeah, initially, of course, you could say, yeah, death metal did kind of lose its edge because some bands like Death ended up changing lyrics from being all about death and gore to all about reality-based, philosophical, like, what's my purpose in life kind of lyrics, which, to be honest, I like those lyrics because it definitely sets a mood for certain individuals, but I do like extreme stuff lyrically at times, which is why I'm a fan of gore and brutal lyrics sometimes, even if your taste can vary. But yeah, of course, the Norwegian bands wanted to go the complete 180. And of course, the big advantage that they had, and while I will say right now, I feel as far as music, death metal was always the most extreme form of metal musically. However, image-wise, definitely black metal, because that was their big ace in the hole against death metal. Was I mean, look at, say, this album cover for Immortal Sons of Northern Darkness, the corpse paint. So they definitely had the advantage when it came to theatricality.
Or even any old dark, especially the big three of Dark Throne. Bliss of the Northern Sky, Transylvanian Hunger, and Under a Funeral Moon. Those are a bit what most of the early covers of death metal would used to look like. Not all of them, but
I mean, those early covers, and Fenris said in an interview that, he would see a lot of death metal covers, and it wouldn't like really shock you. But when you see a black metal cover, just a guy in the woods with corpse paint, it shocks some people instead of seeing a death metal with colors and all that. So they wanted that bit more shock value than death metal could do in their album covers. What would be more shocking? A guy in a corpse paint.
If the early Venom covers, especially Welcome to Hell, Black Metal, and At War with Satan, if the early Venom covers already shocked, imagine getting what would later become the Death Crush EP, Live in Leipzig as well, The Mysterious, the Dark Throne trilogy as well, or even early Gorgoroth as well.
Or even the Dawn of the Black Hearts EP. Bootleg.
That's going a bit too much, I think.
Yeah. But anyway.
But especially those? Absolutely. But it would be later, during the latter stages of second wave, and then with third wave, absolutely, where the cover would become more grandiose. There would become something more of a spectacle, so to say, because this was already the era, late 90s, early 2000s, where black metal was already getting stale. Extreme metal in general was getting a bit stale. So all the rules that were imposed of being underground, having this sort of a sound as well, a raw production, a raw sound as well, it all went out the window when bands like Dimmu Borgir, Cradle of Filth came up to the scene, because they did something that Artur and Celtic Frost started to do before, which was added a bit of synthesizers and a bit of orchestrations as well.
True.
Which was a huge a huge red flag when it came to black metal. It was
the true black metalers.
No,
the true
quote unquote
Exactly.
true black metal.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
I remember Danny Filth in one interview saying the point of extreme metal in general, not just death metal, and especially with black metal as well, was to break all the rules, see how far we can take it, and
True.
why there should be a rule. What the early bands did, they broke all the rules. So Cradle and Dimmu, who became the poster boys for the
Symphonic
third wave
black
of-
metal.
Yeah,
symphonic
and gothic.
black
You
metal.
want to bring some gothic,
which was a
black
bit already the third wave, the third wave. But later there were bands that went back to the roots, so to say. Judas Iscariot, Rotting Christ. Although Rotting Christ is a bit symphonic black metal as well. But
And nowadays, I don't even call them black metal anymore. To me,
but they still have some of the hallmarks.
They
Still,
do.
but they still have some of the
like the their blasting and tremolo picks riffs.
exactly, and even all the thematics, that the lyrical content. They said that they wanted just to go, just full on satanic antichrist or anything of the sort. They wanted to be pagan. They wanted it to be antichrist, but they wanted to be more pagan than they wanted to be more satanic as well.
Yeah. Or in the case of a band like Immortal singing about nothing but the cold, the snow, winter. And that's a big lyrical theme that I notice in a lot of Norwegian bands when they sing about nothing but snow.
Yeah, but yeah, because look at Norway. It's a beautiful place. It has some really cold winters. And you,
Scandinavia in general,
Mhm.
Norway, Sweden,
Yeah.
Finland,
I mean,
Denmark,
Denmark.
Finland,
I mean,
Iceland,
we
Mhm.
gotta admit
Russia.
those
Look
Scandinavian
good.
bands, their environment inspired them so much. I mean, if you look at band like maybe, like I said, maybe Emperor. You look at band like maybe Dark Throne. Their environment helped them create something more extreme that just say something from the death metal side would. Cause come
Singing
on,
about mosquitoes is fun.
yeah,
Or saying about the sun.
yeah.
God.
Humidity. Humidity.
But one other thing I forgot to bring up, as far as like another factor that helped bring in the music influence and the attitude of the second wave or the Norwegian scene, as controversial it might be to Norwegian bands and musicians. I remembered watching the black metal documentary by Bill Zabub when he interviewed a couple members of Marduk, saying if it wasn't for Sweden, the Norwegian scene wouldn't have existed because of Bathory and Dead coming over to join Mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
True.
And then eventually,
Yeah.
when bands started to experiment with the Viking lyrics, it all went back to Bathory again.
In the same way,
True.
in the same way that many people say that Chuck Schuldiner is the godfather of death metal, I still hear a lot of people, whether it's from Satyricon, from Marduk, even Martin. I even remember on Martin Ericon from Celtic Frost saying that black metal would not be what it is today without Bathory. Are they the first black metal band? I disagree. Venom, they were among the first. But
Yes, I would agree.
black metal would not be today if it wasn't for Bathory. And Quorthon, in a way, godfather of the second wave, and what is considered the origins of black metal as we know it today.
Mm-hmm.
True.
Yep. So now that we've kind of gotten a bit of the aesthetic, a little bit of the music, what inspired the scene, and the reactions against other scenes, now let's talk about the bands from the Norwegian scene, the big ones. So I figured a good way to begin is to go around table to pick your favorite band of the Norwegian scene, and I figured we'd start appropriately with Hannah.
Well, I think it's hard to narrow it down to one band, because there are so many. But for me, it's what I like about the Norwegian scene, is how creative it got musically. I'm not a big fan of uh, too much lo-fi production and too much church burnings and stuff like that. And that's why my top three Norwegian bands are, without doubt, Emperor, Enslaved, and probably Windir. Because they took it just musically a step further. And Ulva, not to forget, early Ulva. I love early Ulva. And the thing, what I like about them, I mean, Emperor took it to a whole other artistic level with their symphonic influences and just the grandiosity of the grandeur on in the Nightside Eclipse. I mean, it's, in my opinion, the essential black metal album. Then Windir incorporated so much folk into the music. The same could be said for Enslaved. The early stages, a lot of Viking and folk influences, besides the typical black metal, and then the later experimentation with this kind of progressive black metal. I simply love that. And I mean, the first three Ulva albums are just awesome. I mean, I listened to Bergtat yesterday. Holy shit, that album is just awesome. Kveldsakker as well, and Nattens Madrigal. I mean, and those four bands deviate from the typical Norwegian black metal bands like Mayhem, like Dark Throne, and so on, because they simply went in a totally different musical direction. And I've never been a big fan of the lo-fi. I mean, I can appreciate it, but that's why I like the other bands more.
Ricky.
Oh, it's kind of difficult to choose a band from a scene that inspired so many great bands right now. But if I had to choose, in no particular order, because it could verify. First of all, Mayhem. Mayhem for me let's be honest. Without Mayhem, bands like Behemoth, bands like trying to think of other bands.
Dissection.
Dissection, bands like those without Mayhem, there's a chance that they might happen. I mean, first of all, you got Euronymous. Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Not
You got-
coronavirus, it's just
No, you're-
allergy.
Yeah,
Same
you're good.
here. Same here. Why I
Yeah.
have a bit of a head.
Same with me. Yeah.
You got Euronymous. Arguably, some people call him the godfather of Norwegian black metal. I kind of give that. Go on with Blackthorn from the band Thorns, which is a very underrated Norwegian black metal band. And
Snorri
you know,
Rook.
yeah, I mean, for all purposes, Euronymous invented the typical Norwegian black metal riff, which derivated from Bathory. And
The
then
single
we also
no
got
tremolo picked riffs.
my other choice will be Dark Throne. The first 3 Dark Thrones albums, legendary albums in their own. Sure, the first album is more
It was
thrashy.
a death metal album, Soulside Journey,
Good.
which is a great album, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great
True.
album, a bit more technical and more industrial, even though Fenris admitted that he loves to listen to industrial music. And the third one, I will have to go with Emperor. Because Emperor brought the atmosphere to the Norwegian black metal scene, which, created bands like maybe Agalog, created bands like maybe on the Thors from Onlay, which is a death doom band from Greece that got some inspirations from Emperor. And, those 3 bands, arguably the best 3 Norwegian black metal bands, in my opinion. I would go with Burzum, but I'm debatable with Burzum,
We'll talk about Burzum, though. That's for
we'll
sure.
talk about Burzum in a bit. But the one thing I will give VAR credit, just one thing: suicidal black metal, probably one of the most darkest suicidal music I ever heard in my life, and inspired bands like none.
I'm sorry, but Nicholas Quafford from Shining, he would have something to say.
Well, I know, but VAR kind of gets more credit for that, which, as much as I don't like VAR, I have to give it credit for that.
I think
Yep.
Mark mostly started this whole atmospheric black metal scene, not so much DSBM, mostly ABM.
Not to mention Silencer and Zastur, they would have something to say.
Oh yeah, Exhaustor.
Oh, yeah.
Or the guys from Forgotten Tomb.
I'll just give Vart credit for just him recording all the instruments on his own in the recording section, in the recording studio. Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, but a lot of black metal bands do that.
Yeah. And even some death metal musicians. Dan Swano. Anyways. Raphael, your picks.
Well, there's a lot to pick. I would say that.
There are quite a few bands in that scene.
Yeah. But I will go with obviously the main ones like Mayhem, Emperors, and Dark Throne. Those are the only 3 that really inspired me as far as in the black metal scene.
For me, I got 4. And in my opinion, I would call these bands, if there's a big 4 of American thrash, and there's a big 4 of Swedish death metal, there should be a big 4 of Norwegian black metal, and to me, these would be the 4 bands a part of it. Immortal, Emperor, Mayhem, and Dark Throne, because each of those 4 bands brought in something completely different to the scene. Dark Throne after Soulside Journey, which was a death metal album, maybe tech death, that came out of that Swedish scene, because after all, they went to the same studio that recorded many of the seminal Swedish death metal albums like Left Hand Path. But starting with this one, with Blaze in the Northern Sky, they really embraced their influences of Bathory and Celtic Frost and just took it to a whole nother level. So it was more mid-paced black metal right here, with some fast stuff derived from Bathory. Mayhem, of course, the first band out of the scene, even though they kind of started off a little bit more death metal oriented as far as lyrics and some of the music, then once Dead joins the band, they completely took a whole other direction. And of course, they get pretty much covering all of the hallmarks of black metal. The fast stuff, slow stuff, some tremolo picking, some crazy blast beats, and the insane vocals. So, and then of course they would evolve over time into almost like avant-garde black metal before kind of going back to the roots a little bit with their recent album Daemon, which was out just several months ago. Emperor, of course, the start, arguably, of the symphonic black metal sound that bands like Dimmu and Cradle, among so many others, would pick up on. And also, maybe even a little bit of prog you could throw into the mix a little bit, even though they kind of got more proggy as they went along until the final albums. But yeah, Emperor, very important. And then Immortal, kind of that more stripped down, kind of rock and roll aspect to it, but also a lot more death metal as far as the riffs, their style of blasting. It was very, very different from the other bands. So I would say the most death metal oriented would be Immortal, because of the way they wrote the riffs, the way in which the drums were being performed was, like I said, completely different from the other three bands that I brought up. But each of those four bands brought in a different flavor to the sound. And of course, other bands like Enslaved with the more Viking aesthetic and eventually progressive black metal, and Windeer doing the more blackened folk kind of sound, and Oliver eventually going from like a folky black metal band into more of an avant-garde rock band nowadays. But yeah. But these four are my picks for the four most essential bands in the Norwegian scene. And now Artur.
Artur.
Yeah.
Artur, it's your turn.
I guess there's nothing more that I can add. If I have to say, if I have to call some of the major bands in black metal history, Mayhem is, of course, in many people's lists. I mean, not only for their imagery, but later on for their influential albums like The Mysterious on Satanas. Dark Throne, absolutely. Emperor is just like Hannah, are one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite black metal bands of all time. They were the ones that eventually started off the third wave, which was a more symphonic wave that afterwards would inspire many others. Dark Throne as well, Immortal too, but I also like to give out a bit of a shout to. Despite what many people say about Gorgoroth, I mean Gorgoroth, especially the early ages between the first album, just before to Destroyer, I think before the Gaul era started, they were as black metal as they come. Their ethos, their sound was awesome. Gorgoroth deserves a bit of a mention as well. I don't like to give him too much credit, but I have to give Burzum a bit some credit as well. I mean, for one, the way that he recorded most of the albums, which was in prison with a synthesizer on, and he still released the first album. He still released Aska, that Somengvar, Ilvitz, and later Philosophem as well. And in a way, he was influential in creating the
Atmospheric black metal.
Atmospheric black metal as well. That eventually bands like Summoning and Hooded Madness in a way would incorporate. But if I have to pick the four main, I mean absolutely Mortal, Immortal, Mayhem, Emperor, and of course Dark Throne.
So now that we've discussed bands, now albums. And there are tons of albums from the Norwegian scene all throughout the years that we could pinpoint as being
I can start
favorites.
because I have some of, although you cannot see me, I have some of the albums right here on my pile. I mean, but I can put a little bit some of the proto black metal bands as well. I mean, I don't know if my camera is working, but possibly not. But I'll mention it anyway. I mean, Celtic Frost, the Morbid Tales, and to Megatherion as a bit of a introduction to what black metal would eventually become is a great way to get started. Just like Venom's Welcome to Hell, Merciful Fate's Melissa, or even Don't Break the Oath. But if we want to talk about the real deal, so to say, from all of those bands that we just mentioned, I mean, from Dark Throne, check out the what is called the trilogy, Under a Funeral Moon, not exactly in this order, but Blaze in the Northern Sky, Under a Funeral Moon, and Transylvania. This is where Dark Throne let go a little bit of the death metal influence and started to go full on black. And this was also the time when they would go from a 4-piece to a 3-piece and later a 2-piece as well, with the only 2 remaining members being just good old Uncle Fenris and Nocturnal Cult as well. The Mayhem album, is there any doubt that we don't mention Death Crush, arguably one of the best EPs of all time, as well as The Mysterious Don Satanas, an album that has so much story and blood behind it, but that's a story.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different story. Immortals album, I would
Pure
say start off
Holocaust.
with Sorry?
Pure Holocaust.
Pure Holocaust, Full Moon Mysticism, and even
Battles in the
Battles
North.
in the
Winter.
Battles in the North as well. And as for Emperor, Hannah and everyone else, is there any doubt of
In
the
the night
trilogy?
side eclipse.
I would
There
say-
could only be one.
No, but if I would have to say one, of course, Night Side Eclipse, although honorable mentions to both anthems, and one of the best demos also out there, although a bit sketchy and raw, but so was Death Crush, Wrath of the Tyrant, that most of the songs that were a part of that demo would eventually become part of Night Side Eclipse.
Alright, for me, I mean, I got 4 right here that I have already shown off. I got the most recent one in Immortals, Sons of Northern Darkness, also because I love the production on it from Peter Tatgrid from Hypocrisy, because I just love what he does. Of course, in the Night Side Eclipse, I mean, honestly, is there any doubt? I mean, arguably the best album in Norwegian black metal history as well, even more than De Mysterious or any other Dark Throne album. Of course, speaking of De Mysterious, that's up there. And for the Dark Throne album, for me, it's the one that started their black metal era, Blaze in the Northern Sky. And other albums like... I can't remember the name of it, but a Windir album that I think it's the same album I brought up in the folk metal episode, and I just can't remember what it's called.
1184, Artur.
Journey to the End?
No,
No.
that's 1184. Artur, Lickford, what was the other one?
I'll find it. Because it's killing me that I don't remember what it's called.
My favorite one is 1184.
Or no, it was Artur. That was the one I was thinking of for Windeer. And of course, Enslaved. I'm more of a fan of the recent Enslaved since the 2000s when they became a prog band. And I got End Times. And I forgot to bring that album out of my shelf because that's a fifth Norwegian album that I have. So I would say that as well. But
although if you want the black metal phase of Enslaved, there's mostly two. There's the Eld, there's the Eld album, and there's
Frost.
Frost too. The third album I think is already more transition, but I would say pure black metal releases of Enslaved, possibly those two, Eld and Frost.
Yeah. So, Raphael.
Well, mostly I'll go with obviously Mayhem's. This I do not know how to pronounce the name of that album.
This Mysterious Don Santanas.
I probably have to work on saying that. But I also Dark Thrones, A Blaze from the Northern Sky, Immortals, Pure Holocaust. What can I say? Those and Emperor's obviously Night of the Eclipse.
Ricky.
Well, in an outside eclipse, there's no question about it. There's no chance in hell that album's going anywhere. This Mysterious Dom Satanas, same thing with this Mysterious Dom Satanas. Transylvanian Hunger, another one. Blaze of Northern Sky, Pure Holocaust, the Death Crush EP. I know there's one more I'm missing. Oh shit. And Sunset in Northern Sky by Immortal. And then I have this book right here from 2004 about a list that this Artur, tongue twist. Author, yeah. What's wrong with me? That has a list of his own. It has maybe like maybe 15 albums, and I'm gonna list them off. Under the Sign of the Black Mark by Bathory, The Oath of Black Blood by Beherit, Philosopher, Burzum, Transylvanian Hunger, Dark Throne, Into the Nightside Eclipse, Emperor, Frost, Enslaved, The Sumerian by Dissection, Battles in the North by Immortal, Panzer Division Marduk by Murdoch, This Mysterious Dom Satanas.
I don't know. I agree with Marduk, but
A lot of them are Swedish.
Yeah, that's what I was noticing too. Yeah, what's up? Oh, no, never mind. Antes Madre by Ober. And the last one, I'm going to try to pronounce it. And then some Horde Uproar by...
Det som Engva Vark, oder? Or
by Mortis.
Mortis.
Yeah, I mean, some of these bands are more Swedish, some questionable. Yeah.
Like Dissection, you could argue being borderline black metal and mellow death.
Yeah,
I would say,
even
and if I had to choose the Dissection album, there's no question I would choose A Storm in the Lights Bay.
Yep.
Oh, no question about it.
If we were to have included the Swedish scene.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I always say, Dissection is one of those.
Oh, you don't like Storm in the Lights Bay?
Yeah, I think it's a great album, but I prefer the Zombelay. Out of the two of them. Don't know, I've always liked the Zombelay more than A Storm of the Night's Bane.
But anyways, and then Artur. Well, oh yeah, we already got Artur. Hannah.
Well, I have to agree with you on most of the albums you've mentioned. Of course, De Mysterious Dom Satanas and Death Crush, and also Live in Leipzig are classic Mayhem albums, or EPs or live albums or whatever. Then I mean, Varg has released some awesome music before going totally nuts.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't already nuts.
I mean
Yeah.
everything from Aske to Dunkelheit. No,
Philosopher.
Philosopher, yeah, sorry. I mean, it's just classic and kickstarted so many different branches of black metal. I mean, the Dark Thrones trilogy, early Enslaved, early Immortal, I mean, Pure Holocaust, and At the Heart of Winter, everything they've released is classic. The first 3 Ulva albums, and so on. I mean, especially early Emperor, and the Nightside Eclipse, classic albums, but also stuff like Satyricon with Nemesis Divina.
I forgot.
Oh, straight
a
con.
classic album. And I mean, and the next one might be quite.
Even Dark Medieval Times too.
Yes, that's as well. And the next one might be a bit controversial, but early Dimmu Borgir, Enthroned Darkness Triumphant, until the Puritanical album. I mean, in my opinion, those early Dimmu Borgir albums are classic as well. Also, despite moving in a totally different direction and including symphonic and classical musical elements. And the album production getting cleaner, but so did the album production on in the Nightside Eclipse, and and I mean it exposed black metal more to the mainstream. But I think all those church burnings and stuff like that did that anyway. So I mean, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with the stuff Dimmu Borgir did. And I mean, there's so many classic albums out there, you can't name them all, but.
And mind if I, and also to throw in another band, even though I don't really consider them pure black metal, I think most of us can agree where we'd call them a progressive metal band, and that's Borknagar.
Yeah.
Throw their name into the hat, and
or
get...
Dothamens Guard.
Yeah. But now that you mentioned Satyricon,
Artur as well.
Now that you mentioned Satyricon, I want to say something about Satyricon. I've always considered Satyricon more kind of between second wave and third wave black metal, less than the second wave, because I think Satyricon is, let's admit it, they're kind of like the forgotten ones, because when you think of Norwegian black metal, you don't think of Satyricon right away. You probably think of like at the very end. Like, I'm gonna be honest, Satyricon, as great of a band they are, they're sometimes forgotten, because they're more related to like the third wave of black metal.
I think especially why people forget about them nowadays is because they include so many of these black and roll elements, and are a bit more leaning towards classical heavy metal elements, especially on the latest 3 albums.
And also Satyricon, in many aspects, they went from full on black metal until Nemesis Divina. Then they released Rebel Extravaganza, and that album was controversial to say the least. Then they went a little bit black and roll, so to say, with Black Crow and Tombstone in their Age of Nero title. Not to mention Volcano with Fuel for Hatred, King, the Pentagram Burns, and all that stuff. If we're being honest, they're great songs, yes. Are they full on black metal? No.
There are black metal elements in there,
but there, and even later with their self-titled, with their recent self-titled album. Sorry, no COVID here. If you hear that Phoenix song with that guy from,
I love that song.
Yeah, but you don't think of black metal like that. I mean, the problem with Satyricon being forgotten is that it's a bit the problem that I have with more recent Dark Throne. They have gone so much to some of the other genres that kind of they've forgotten their black metal roots.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like with Dark Throne, and we've talked about this before in other episodes
Or
when it
just
came to recent Dark Throne. Like, yeah, after the cult is alive, when they started adding in the crust punk elements, then they just started to go more into old school heavy metal, which I love. I love the new Dark Throne stuff. Not so much Arctic Thunder, because I thought they were trying a little too hard going back to black metal, and it didn't work to their benefit all that much. But whereas with Old Star, where they kind of brought it back in a little bit, but incorporating more doom, I thought it was much more well done. But yeah, like some bands going into other styles. I mean if
just
it's
look
what the
at
bands
Ulva.
want to do, then how can we blame them?
Yeah, just look at Ulva. I mean, they've gone.
They're
from
now
a-
an avant-garde rock band.
Yeah.
No, that synth pop, synth wave, like Depeche Mode. Just look at the assassination of Julius Caesar. But I mean, music is still great.
True.
I mean
Yeah,
that's the
then,
thing. That's the
Oh,
That's
go
the
ahead.
thing that I think about Satiricon, bands like Satiricon, bands like Dimmu Borgir, even Cradle of Filth. Sure, their first couple of, like, for Cradle of Filth, the only black metal album that quote unquote they ever did was the first one. After that,
Yeah.
more gothic, more symphonic. Same thing with Dimmu.
Yeah.
After Dimmu's first two albums, they went more symphonic, started adding the keyboards, started adding
True.
more operatic elements.
Although
True.
in the case of Cradle, there are still some albums there that are full-on black metal releases. I mean,
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Funeral in Carpathia, excellent. Vampire or Fifth Empire, however you want to call it.
Mhm.
It has also some great black metal releases as well, but Dimmu and Cradle, they still preserve a lot of the black metal essence to it, although they have become more symphonic, more gothic,
True.
and such.
So now that we've gotten albums out there, now let's get to what people really wanted to hear us talk about, and that's the stories of the murders, the church burnings.
Gee. How it all started.
So I guess the appropriate way to start is to go to the very beginning, and that's with Dead. So, as most of us metal fans know, around end of 87, early 88, Pelle Olin, also known as Dead, from Sweden, who came out of a band called Morbid, decided to, after he discovered that Mayhem was looking for a new singer, sent a demo tape from, I believe it was Morbid, or it might have been something
Morbid.
else,
Yeah.
and send it
It was
to them
Morbid.
for them to listen to, see if they would be interested in
It
getting
was
them in the
morbid.
band.
It was morbid.
Okay. And they liked it so much to the point where, you know what? Come on over to Norway and we'll get you in the band. And so Pelle goes to Norway to move in with Mayhem in a little house they had. And thus the Dead era of Mayhem started at that moment. And eventually Hellhammer joins on drums. And you get, honestly, the classic lineup of Mayhem: Dead, Euronymous, Hellhammer, and Necrobutcher. And you get, of course, two great songs out of that lineup: Carnage and Freezing Moon, the first version of Freezing Moon.
True.
But then you would get the concerts where Dead was doing stuff that was unheard of for shows at the time. Literally cutting himself on stage, throwing pig heads and squirting blood into the
Jeez.
audience. And
I mean, that at the time was very shocking, but also an inspired. I mean, look at band like Gorgoroth has some very graphic things on stage.
Watain
Watain.
as well.
Being one of them.
Behemoth.
Yeah.
to a
Yeah,
certain
Behemoth as
extent.
well.
So, like I said, Dead brought the shock value to black metal by burying his stage clothes,
In dirt
On
for a
dirt?
few days, yeah.
inhaling Dead by I think it was like a rotten bird or a
Bird.
rotten rat.
In a bag.
Yeah.
And
Dead just loved Dead. I mean, he lived for Dead. He I mean, for all purposes,
Personified death.
personified dead. Yeah.
And
True.
let's not forget how that happened, because it's been told in the past. Although there are conflicting stories as to how it happened. Some people say it was an ice skating accident. Some say because he was bullied as a child and he nearly died. But he did have a near-death experience that never left him.
Bless you.
Thanks.
That never left him, and he basically became obsessed with it afterwards. So, gotta keep that in mind.
Even when he sent the mixtape, he had a crucified rat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, he was the youngest member in Mayhem.
Yeah.
I think-
Well,
I think it was-
Hellhammer, same age.
Well, yeah, I think they were around neck and neck.
And also when all the times that they went to the house in the woods, which later became Mayhem's one of many Mayhem's rehearsal studios. I mean, we have seen some of those images of Dead just walking around the woods and just walking around the woods. I mean, you could tell that he had some. He was depressed, as it was later found. But in a way, it inspired him to create this character that would become Dead. I mean, the corpse going on stage with the infamous clothes in the dirt, that he would unearth them. But then again, he's not the only one to do some messed up shit like that. Slipknot's Clown, you hear the stories that he had a dead crow on a bag and he would inhale it before the shows.
Yeah. And
So he's not the only one to do some messed up shit, but
true.
I mean,
And-
and even Dead when he started out, and he was very much friends with some of the bands, but afterwards we would find out later, despite Necro Butcher and Hellhammer being great friends, there was one who treated it shit.
And that was Euronymous.
Euronymous, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also with that added in on top, Euronymous basically being an asshole to him, basically made his attitude worse, to the point where we get to the infamous day in April 91 where Pella basically committed probably the most brutal suicide I've ever heard of. Literally slitting his wrists, slitting his throat, writing a suicide note with
And
the
this-
lyrics
and
to the song
and
Life
this-
Eternal.
And this was before Kurt Cobain's suicide with a shot.
Yep.
3
Yeah.
years
Right to his
beforehand.
mouth.
And and as bleeding, writing a suicide note and the lyrics to the classic song Life Eternal before finishing all off with a shotgun blast to the head.
Yeah.
Now this is when everything turns really insane. Whereas that day, now Lords of Chaos can say whatever they want, but we all know that Euronymous was at Mannheim's house, went to the Mayhem house, and climbed up the window
Saw that.
into the house and saw Pella dead. And of course, we know the story that instead of calling the cops, goes out and buys a
took a
disposable
picture.
camera and took pictures of the dead body, staging it and stuff like that.
And
And,
then-
then Necro Butcher finds out
What-
and quits the
He
band.
got pissed off after that. And then that's when
who wouldn't? I mean, your best friend, seeing his dead body, corpse there, and you take a picture of it. Come on,
Before
man, I
calling the
wouldn't-
cops to get him
and
out.
And apparently taking parts of the skull.
ugh,
Which has already been confirmed. It wasn't Dead Skull. It was in fact Chicken Bone.
yeah, it was. And then he puts
But-
that picture on the Dark Horse album.
The
Actually, that
Dawn of
was
the
a
Black
bootleg.
Hearts.
That was a
Yeah.
bootleg that came out in '95.
Yeah,
Just,
a
just
paint-
like
it was a
another,
painting.
just like another one that had also an iconic imagery "Fuck Me Jesus" by Marduk, which was also a bootleg, as well. But I mean, yeah, you had that suicide in one cover, but then you had another one which was mostly, which is also iconic in black metal, the infamous "Fuck Me Jesus,"
True.
Yeah.
non-crucifix stuff.
But yeah,
I cannot say that, otherwise he gets demonetized.
True.
Who knows? But, so yeah, then after Necrobutcher leaves, then Mayhem starts going through a period where they're trying to get new members. They eventually get a bassist and vocalist named Occultus, who eventually, and this is the thing.
We're forgetting one thing. Helvet and the Black Sun.
Helvet.
I was gonna get to that, but yeah, with now this is one thing that was never put into Lords of Chaos, the movie, and that is that Euronymous was known for sending death threats to people.
Yeah.
And he would send death threats to Occultus, which had Occultus leave the band, and then I believe we get to, or a little bit beforehand, we get the Helveta record store, which in essence is a pretty cool record store if it was still around, with everything extreme metal, death metal, grind, black, old school.
It's still around. They have from what I heard, they reopened Helvet, and it's on the same place.
Huh. But then, of course, oh, what? But then, of course, as told many times, the basement of the place would be where you get the infamous Black Circle. Basically, all of the cool people in black metal. There are so many individuals in there. You had, of course, Euronymous, Hellhammer, Fenris from Darkthrone, Faust from Emperor. At one point, Occultus was in there.
Varg.
Eventually, Varg.
Ishan and Samoth from Emperor as well. They attended a few gatherings too.
True.
Now, of course, with the Black Circle, you get some funny stories out of them, like Varg told about it in Until the Light Takes Us, about they would be sitting behind the counter at the store talking about, like, cornflakes. Fenris asks him, "How do you like your cornflakes?" "I like them crispy." "No, you need to eat them soft. Put a little milk in there and let sit for a bit."
You need to soak them for a bit. Let them get absorbed.
So, of course, you had a lot of completely different personalities within the Black Circle. You get the asshole in the Euronymous. You get the super funny nice guy in Fenris. The neo-Nazi of Varg. And
you get the
else.
serious Faust. Because he always seemed like a serious person.
Yeah. So, there you had the Black Circle. And then, once Varg comes over from Bergen to Oslo to be a part of everything, that's when you would eventually get Burzum starting up, where he would go to Gregan Hall Studios, I believe it was called, to record his albums, and he would try and be as primitive and lo-fi and raw as you could possibly get, with using a headset for a microphone to record everything. And eventually, we start getting the church burnings that everyone loves to talk about.
June 6, 1992. The first church burnings, Fantop. Fantop State Church. Fantop State Church. The infamous church burnings. Jesus Christ.
Which Bruisum then put it in one of his album covers.
The Oscar EP.
Oscar, thing around there.
Whatever. Whatever. So yeah, we start getting the church burnings, and of course there are many rumors as to who all was actually involved, but we do know Varg was the big one. Of course you would have
a poster from Varg from 92.
Wow.
How obvious can you get?
Coming soon.
I've got that on my battle vest.
Oh God.
Of course, and then there were some other people that were rumored to be involved, like Samoth from Emperor was involved, Faust,
Euronymous.
Euronymous.
yeah, Blackthorn, Euronymous. Even though there are rumors of whether or not he actually did it.
They say that Euronymous was among the first one or the first two, but I think he went just to one and then
then stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, he stopped. And then after that, Euronymous did his usual thing, sending death threats to people.
Yeah.
And
And eventually we start seeing the power struggle between Varg and Euronymous.
And Euronymous.
which eventually leads to that infamous Kerrang interview that Varg Vikernes did, which eventually let him in jail. And
and did that smirk smile.
It was thanks to that interview that supposedly Euronymous said that he ruined black metal. He ruined black metal for all. That thanks to that interview, all the attention was focused on Helvete, on the
inner circle.
On the black circle as well, which eventually leads to the electroshock.
Yeah, but there's one
But
thing
even before all that, we still got one other big controversy, and that was the murder
Faust.
of the homosexual man by Faust.
In Lillehammer.
Right next to you, Hannah.
What?
What? I said right next to Hannah. Lillehammer.
No, it's not far away.
Okay. But yeah, the infamous Faust murder.
But the satanical murders in Germany that happened here during the first wave of German black metal, that's not too far away from where I live.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we hear the story all the time about how he was walking around the woods. There was a gay guy that wanted to be with
Faust.
He said no, and then he started to really
be obsessive.
Eventually to really be sassy and try really to get in. And then we all know what happened. He stabbed that guy to death. If I'm recalling, late 1992 or early 19.
Yeah, late 92, I believe.
92. Yeah, 92. Yeah.
But yeah, back to. Go ahead, Ricky.
I was gonna say about the church burnings for a bit. Varg was convicted of only 3 church burnings. Everything else after those first three church burnings, imitation. People will burn churches for hell's sake and all that, which originally, if you believe the stories, the reason they started burning the churches was to bring back what Christianity took from Norway, their heritage, their roots, paganism, Odism, and wanted that back in Norway, back to roots.
Especially to stick it to that we discussed a bit before we started, that some of the churches, namely those churches that eventually got burned, they were built over circles, over stone circles, over the ancient sites where the pagan druids would host their rituals. So this was more in a way to stick it to the church for removing their identity.
Yeah.
And,
which I'm just gonna say, burning churches, not a good idea. Don't do it.
No.
I was
You're
gonna
just-
say actually. I was gonna make my final point about the. Artur did.
Yeah,
Meh.
that's
Meh.
that is unnecessary to do.
But my perspective on church burnings is this. I mean, I was born and raised a Christian. I'm not as religious as I used to be. I'm not very religious at all. I do occasionally say prayer for people that I care for and such, but that's really it. Like, I don't go to church anymore and such. But my perspective about it is, like, if you want to fight for something, burning a church down is not going to accomplish anything. If anything,
It's
all
not.
you are doing is solidifying their faith and bringing them closer. Like, if you really feel strongly about something, do something more productive rather than committing acts of violence and landing yourself in prison. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Like, mostly just have a conversation, say, mostly just talking, because violence just leads to more violence. And that's what burning churches
And
will
who
do.
wins? Who wins in the end? Nobody.
Nobody. So,
That could be a metaphor for the whole world,
yeah.
And speaking of violence, there's one more thing we need to talk about. The infamous.
And that is the infamous murder of Euronymous.
Which
Now, of course,
all
there
started-
are so many conflicting stories as to what led to it. Some people say because Euronymous was talking at Helveta about killing Euronymous and making a snuff film of him, first by stunning him with a stun gun or electroshock pistol, and then torturing him in the woods.
That was the plan. That was the plan. The reason was, as I stated, was one of the reasons was because that interview with Kerrang magazine brought too much attention to the movement, and Euronymous did not want that. He was even forced to shut down Helvete because he was afraid that this would eventually that eventually would lead on to their parents. That was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
And of course, there are even other reasons. Like some people think, because of
money disputes.
Money disputes involving the sales for Burzum Records.
True. Which this all started, which Varg really said the actual reason why Euronymous died. Varg says that Euronymous would send him death threats, and in his mind he goes and says, okay, this guy wants to kill me, so now I need to go kill him.
He thought better him than me, essentially.
Yeah.
Which leads us to that night, August
10th, 1993.
August 10th, 93. So we get to that infamous night. So rumor has it that, or legend has it that Varg called Euronymous about the contract to turn over the rights for Burzum to Varg out of Death Like Silence Productions, and comes over, and they're talking about the contract and stuff. And of course, conflicting rumors once again, like of who started attacking who first. Some people think Varg went after Oystein first, or some people say Oystein went after Varg first. But regardless, fighting happens, and the way Varg describes it in Until the Light Takes Us, he says that Euronymous kicked him in the chest, and then that led to a takedown, and that Euronymous tried to go get his knife in the kitchen, and he said, well, if he's going to get a knife, I got to get a knife. And he had this small pocket knife and kept him from getting to his knife, which eventually leads to more scuffling going on. And Blackthorn, or Snorri Rook, was there, and he was shocked by everything. And Varg even said at one point he thought, are they both going to come after me? Considering Blackthorn did play session guitars on De Mysterious, Dom Satanas. And then when he realized, okay, he's not helping me. And then, of course, more fighting happens, and then more stabbing, and eventually Euronymous gets stabbed in the skull, dead immediately.
Some say, and I don't know if this is true, but some say that Blackthorn, he was mostly friends with Varg, who heard the plan from Euronymous, and then Blackthorn went to Varg and said what was going to happen. So in a way, intentionally or not, Blackthorn in a way was a spy.
To some extent,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to break down the question. One of the big questions in this whole dilemma. What if it was the other way around? What if Euronymous killed Varg? How do you think that would turn out?
I do remember Cover Killer Nation did a video about this. I haven't watched it, and I need to, but I really don't know. I mean, of course, Euronymous would have been sent to prison. Of
True.
course.
Yeah.
But
I
I think probably Necro will probably kill them. By that time.
That's the
Considering Necro
Yeah.
Butcher has in the years since talked about how he wanted to kill Euronymous.
Yeah.
Mayhem probably would have never have released
Anything.
anything.
Mhm.
They would just leave with the Mysterious and then nothing, because Euronymous would return to the band, but then Necro Butcher would not. Alhammer might have stayed, I don't know.
Yeah, he was
But-
like the middleman in that whole thing.
Yeah. And I don't think
And-
Maniac would have came back
Yeah,
either.
and I don't know if this is so many ifs. This is so many ifs. Maybe Attila would have not have continued on with the band. Blasphemer, Rune Eriksson would never have come up to play guitarist. But I would say that the black metal scene would be a whole lot different.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
And instead of the Florida death metal scene or death metal in general, the targets would be Dimmu Borgir and Cradle by this time, or even later on, Karak Angren.
Yeah, but we also have to admit, Fenris and everyone in the inner circle didn't know that Varg killed Euronymous at
It
first.
wasn't until like a week or two later when they found out.
They all thought it was some Swedish death metalheads, because there was a rivalry. We know there's a rivalry
Big
between
rivalry
Swedish
between-
death metal and Norwegian black metal.
Oh,
One of the
yeah.
biggest rivalries in recent history. Because
Well,
it was in...
I mean, yeah, like we talked about.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like we talked about earlier with how the second wave Norwegian scene was basically a reaction against death metal. If you ask me honestly, there wouldn't have been shit between those two as far as like wanting to fight each other and whatnot. I feel it was all just hype. Even the guys in Marduk even felt that it was all media hype, not so much the musicians within each scene.
But then again, this has a little bit to do with what Necro would eventually say. But Fenris was good friends with both of them. But in many interviews in recent years, I don't think I've heard maybe 2, 3, 4 maybe from the Norwegian scene or maybe from the Swedish scene. Maybe 4 had 3 good words to say about Euronymous. Most of them hated Euronymous. That's why even when it came to the Black Circle leadership dispute, most of them, they were going Varg's way. They were not going Euronymous.
Yeah, because Euronymous was just talk, and not that much action. That's the thing that Varg despised about Euronymous. Euronymous just talked the talk, but never did any action. That's why
Never
Varg...
walked the walk, yeah.
Yeah, that's why
he
Varg...
just talks.
That's why
but not walk
Varg
alone.
did the first church burnings, because Euronymous for years would say, we gotta burn the church, just and all that. He never did it
He's like,
until Varg did it, and
Yeah.
that was the whole dispute.
Mhm.
That's when the power
True.
struggle started to happen.
Yeah. Which then leads to the arrest of Varg, the infamous trial with the killer smile, and him being sentenced to 21 years in prison, but only served 15? I believe he
No.
was released in 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
So
then it was-
15
and
he served.
Faust getting the 14 years in prison.
And testifying against Varg.
That's why he got the
In
14
court.
years. Because if
Yeah.
not, he would have gotten probably the maximum of 21 years as well.
Yeah, and then of course there were other musicians in the scene that ended up getting arrested. In fact, two members of In the Night Sky Eclipse, Samoth was arrested for a few years for the church burnings. Tchort was arrested for assault.
Faust was still in jail, but they still managed to record Faust's drum set before he was arrested. Samoth eventually came out and recorded the rest of the guitars for In the Night Side Eclipse. It was afterwards with Anthem, where Faust was in jail, so they cut Faust and they brought him
Trim.
Yeah.
But so those, and then there was another guy, and I can't remember his name. He used to play in a band called Hades Almighty, who also was arrested for church burnings.
No clue.
Jorn Tonsberg, I believe his name was, because I remembered an interview with him on Metal Headbanger's Journey about it. So there was another one right there that I completely forgot to mention. So in the end, Varg gets sentenced to prison, gets released in 2009, and ever since then, he lives in France now, and now his name is Louis. Dumbass.
Louis.
Not you have to say with a French accent. Louis.
Louis.
Luigi!
And now has a wife and kids, and he calls his kids hobbits because he's such a Lord of the Rings freak.
Side note, and this is because I live with someone with the same symptom. His wife is autistic, and one of his children is also autistic.
Jeez.
But that's how all that ended up happening. And then after everything, basically the scene, in my opinion, as far as insane shock value, basically died, because now we can listen to the Norwegian stuff and just think to ourselves, well, that's good music, but it's like there's not much as far as shock value anymore, because even with bands like Gorgoroth and Swedish bands like Watain doing the crazy pyro and spikes and the cutting themselves and pigs' heads, it's like Dead did it all first, so it's like
the infamous Black Mass in Poland. I think it was
Krakow.
But I'll admit, that took it to another level, because if I remember, Alice Cooper started a shock value, but Dead just took it more beyond than what Alice Cooper would think.
Even Alice Cooper, he said on the first Metal Headbanger's Journey, the first Sam Dunn documentary, when he interviewed, he said Alice Cooper said black metal in Norway is so Spinal Tap. I'm sorry, love you, Alice, but it's not Spinal Tap. There are some guys there that live at the fullest. Some, half of those guys probably is what Alice Cooper says it, but guys like Gull, King of Hell not that much, but guys like Gull, Eric Danielson from Watain, John Notquist from Dissection, and
Nicholas
some others.
Quaforth.
Exactly. Even the guys from Death Spell Omega, not to mention Zastur,
The entire band Dark Nocturne Slaughter Cult.
Yeah, these guys live it to the fullest. So it's not that Spinal Tap as you might think, Alice.
Yeah. But at the end, so now, before we get to the other big thing, where is Norwegian black metal at now? Well, many of the classics are still going strong. Mayhem's still putting out music. Dark Throne's still putting out music. Immortal's back to making music. Really, the only big band that hasn't put out any new music in a long time is Emperor. Yeah, they've been doing gigs, but there's not been talk about if they're going to make their first album since 2001.
And this is a bit of a thing. This is a bit of a thought that went to. Does Emperor needs to do another album?
No,
Probably
I think
not.
it's better if
No.
They've done. I
leave
feel
it.
Emperor has done everything they could do, but some people may like to hear one last album, maybe.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree of that entirely, but I don't think. I don't think that Emperor doesn't needs to do an album. I mean, Samoth has other projects like Zyklon B and such. Ishan has it. Yeah, Ishan has his solo career, which is very good. In fact.
Yeah, well, probably one of the best, most underrated solo careers in metal history. And then, like I brought up before, Chord, who played bass on In the Nightside Eclipse, eventually formed two completely different entities of bands. Green Carnation, which was more prog, death, gothic, and Blood Red Throne, which is essentially Norwegian cannibal corpse.
And but still he plays in black metal bands. I mean, he's still one of the guitar players for Carpathian Forest.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like now Norway, as far as metal in general, it's like, yeah, black metal's still very prominent, but you got so many other genre scenes in Norway now. You got the Norwegian prog scene, Norwegian death metal, Norwegian slam death metal with the band Cranium.
Even old school rock and roll. I mean, Enforcer Eclipse. So
Chrome Division.
Revival, yeah. Which Chrome Division?
Turbo Negro.
Oh.
Probably the funniest of them all.
And Chrome Division has Shagrath from Dimmu Borgir as their guitar player.
But of course, my favorite scene out of the other scenes would be the prog scene, mostly thanks to Borknagar and just how amazing they are. But so that's where we are now with not only Norwegian black metal and Norwegian metal.
Which makes you think that Borknagar was this super group comprised of most of them black metal acts. I mean, ICS Vortex played in Arturus, Dimmu Borgir, and many others. Winter Sword, which unfortunately is not there right now. He was in his own band, Winter Sword. Garden from Over also was a featured member in Borknagar.
Early on, Ivar from Enslaved.
Exactly. And I think one of the guitar players is also from Winter Sword as well. So it is
and former Immortal drummer Grim, I believe, was his name.
Yeah, for a short period
Early
of time.
Yeah. So now that we've talked all about that, now let's get to the other big thing. We've talked about
just a bit. Sorry, Levi, but just a bit of a side note was the fact that now, just to put a side note, the fact that now black metal has left out Norway, and we have seen some other scenes coming up as well. I mean, the Greek black metal scene headed by Rotting Christ. Italy that had a scene as well with bands like Death SS and
Opera
and
9.
many others.
Opera 9.
Yeah.
Exactly, Opera 9 too. Austria that has a black metal scene as well with Abagor, among others, but Abagor, Summoning as well. The Finnish scene that spawned
Around the same time as the Norwegian scene.
Beherit, Satanic Warmaster, Horna, and
Archgoad, Impaled Nazarene.
Exactly. So, in a way, while the black metal, the original bands from Norway are still going strong, most of them, now the scene has sort of become diverse. I mean,
Global.
Greece
Yeah.
and
France,
global,
Russia, Poland, America,
Poland.
Look, we got a Florida one.
Brazil.
Right here.
Australia,
yeah, Medusa. So
Germany,
the scene
I'm friends with this
has
band, by the way.
Switzerland,
Portugal.
Ukraine.
We have
Everywhere.
in Portugal, we do have a black metal scene that still to this day Ricky refuses to believe that we have a band called Corpus Christi here.
Yeah.
and you even have black metal from locations like the Middle East, South America, Africa, everywhere, Japan, Indonesia has a huge black metal scene, China, Taiwan even. I mean, it's just amazing where this kind of music is coming from. Former former states of the Soviet Union. I mean, you've got lots of bands coming out of Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, everywhere, and And the funny thing is, or what I like about this local scenes is that they incorporate folklore into the music from where they are, and that's simply amazing.
We forgot about one scene, which is one of the biggest black metal scenes here in Europe, the Ukrainian scene. Nocturnal Mortum. Oh, sorry. Nocturnal Mortum, Drutkov,
Proda.
Yeah.
Even the UK.
Winterfell.
Oh yeah, the UK.
And so on.
Balsagoth. It's everywhere.
Finn.
Like even here in America, you got like, even though you could argue there's something else, but like Agalok, Wolves in the Throne Room, Uada.
Whoa. Don't mention Wolves in the Throne Room. Seattle, Washington does not count as a black metal scene.
I agree with that.
If you want to say
and
Agalok, okay. Sorry.
Panopticon.
If you want to say Panopticon, Judas Iscariot,
Wayfarer. I could
like
go
I said,
on and on and on.
the Seattle scene is shit. But all those other bands, Judas Iscariot, Medusa, Panopticon, Profanatica, and all those others, yeah, not the Seattle bullshit scene, or as it is known today, the hipster black metal scene.
Yeah.
But now, time finally for a part of the discussion many people have wanted us to talk about ever since last year.
Ever since
Lords
the first
of Chaos.
Chaos.
Alrighty, so we're mostly talking about the movie.
More specifically, the movie.
The movie,
the
not
book.
so much the book. The movie. Oh man, we're gonna have a lot to say about this.
I've got one word for you. Dreadful.
I agree.
So, for those who don't know, early last year a film came out called Lords of Chaos, which was supposed to be based on the Norwegian black metal scene. However,
it was shot by Jonas Åkerlund, a former member of Bathory.
yeah, which you would think Jonas Åkerlund, the former drummer in Bathory's first album, who had ties to the scene, doing a movie about the Norwegian black metal scene sounded like an amazing idea.
No.
However, we get the film itself, where they decide, instead of basing it on Until the Light Takes Us, pure fucking mayhem, documentaries that tell you everything that happened, they instead go by the book.
You mean this book?
Yes, I mean that book. Now, credit, they did put out a warning. This movie is based on truth, lies, and what actually happened. So they were being very clear that not everything was going to be 100% accurate. Now, biopics as a whole, you're going to have inaccuracies regardless, whether it's because they just didn't know any better or they wanted to throw in something else, to throw in a curveball into the actual film for creativity purposes. I can get that to some degrees. But with a thing such as Norwegian black metal, particularly the controversies, if you're going to do it, for God's sake, do it right. And they didn't. Well, some things they did get right, but some things not so much. Now, my thing about Lords of Chaos, I've seen it a few times. As a movie, if you were an outsider of the scene and just wanted to watch a movie, it's not the worst movie ever. I have seen way worse movies in my life. What's a terrible movie that I've seen? This movie called ATM with Josh Peck, where it's nothing but about them hanging out in an ATM with a stalker.
I have a worse movie than that. The 2016 all-female Ghostbusters.
Oh God! That.
Or the frickin' Charlie's Angels reboot this past fall.
Oh,
God.
Jeez.
There are ways. My point is. Oh. Me. My point is, there are way worse movies out there than Lords of Chaos. If anything, Lords of Chaos, to me, I put into this category of not so good movies where it's so bad, it's good. And and to me, that could be a redeeming quality, like a guilty pleasure kind of thing. And I mostly like it for the movie, not so much the accuracy of the story. If I was going to go into the movie thinking I'm going to see what actually happened but in movie form, then yeah, I would have been more upset than I would be about it. But as a movie, it's not that bad. As a biopic of trying to portray what actually happened, not the best job they could have done. But then again, you're going to run into that problem with biopics in general. Now, as far as like how everything was portrayed, I agree, the way they portrayed Varg was completely stupid. The way they portrayed Euronymous was completely stupid, where they try to make him seem like the good guy and everything, when no, he wasn't. Then again, Varg wasn't a good guy in the situation either. They were, if anything, they were both the bad guys.
Yep.
And just like...
And some of the things that they put out on that movie, I mean, all the kids going around shouting Satan. I mean,
no.
I already have that problem when I go to Vagos and other metal festivals here. You always hear some stupid idiot, and I'll say, "You stupid idiot," shouting Satan when it has nothing to do with it. That's already
true.
Stereotyping metalheads as well. The other part, Scorpions. It wasn't the Scorpions patch that they wanted to, that Varg ripped off of his jacket. It was in fact except that he had on his jacket, and he ripped it off. And then the two stupidest things of the movie. That was not killing cats. That from the reports from Necrobutcher, from Hellhammer, even from Maniac, which
were occultists.
Yes, he never shot any cats. So
he didn't like cats, but he never killed them.
Yeah, he never killed them.
And he did not have any cats hung on his wall, on his roof. And the stupidest scene of them all. Got milk, or in this case, cocoa milk.
Yeah. And making Varg a vegetarian when he said he never was vegetarian apart from like one time in his life. Yeah. Now,
even Varg stated several times over, there was not milk involved. Not chocolate milk, not whole milk. There was
Nothing.
no milk
No milk at all.
It was just the stabbings and nothing else. So why, in the freezing moon, pun intended, Jonas
I'm gonna have to
Åkerlund-
steal that saying now.
Exactly. Jonas Åkerlund, who had access to Euronymous' family, he had access to the sites and to some of the information that was granted to him. Where the hell did he get the idea for chocolate milk?
And here's another thing that was pretty stupid. Since when did we ever know that Euronymous had a girlfriend? Never.
He never.
Why? Now,
Not
Yeah.
to mention that all the actors that they chose, they had no resemblance to the original guys. I don't know who made
not
that cast, but the only one that still had some resemblance was the guy who played Dan.
yeah, Jack Kilmer, Val Kilmer's son.
Varg, the actor who played Varg, had nothing to look like Varg. Euronymous had nothing to look.
Rory
didn't look like
Culkin.
him. Yeah,
Macaulay Culkin's
the only
brother.
one that the only one that actually looked like was Dan. Even
And now-
Metallion, who was really the photographer for the bands, and he was one of the reporters as well. He wasn't as fat as it was portrayed.
Yeah. And because I have to go take a leak real quick, I'll let everybody else weigh in on what they hated about the movie, and I'm gonna let Hannah begin because I bet you got a lot to say.
So far I've only watched once, and I probably will never ever see it again because I found it utterly dreadful to watch. I mean, besides all the historical inaccuracies and the not too stellar casting, in my opinion, what set me off the most about this movie is simply the lack of Norwegian black metal in this movie. I mean, if I'm going to shoot a movie about black metal, or at least a Norwegian black metal scene at that times, the first thing I would expect of this movie is for it to feature true Norwegian black metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that Jonas Åkerlund and his team had problems getting the band agree to let them use their music. So I mean, it's sort of relatable, but I mean, why not? Norwegian black metal is fairly easy to create. At least the instrumental, just use some double bass, some bass guitar, and some tremolo picking on guitar, and boom, you have your movie soundtrack. Well, and that's the lack of black metal. I mean, of course, it featured this one Mayhem song, but I mean, that's the biggest no-go for me in regards to this movie. Simply the lack of Norwegian black metal.
Yeah.
And I rarely watch movies, but if I do, I expect them to be good, and this movie was just shit, in my opinion. I mean, just the scenes where Dad is walking through the woods, and I hated that. I mean, I had to stop so many times and motivate myself to keep on watching, and then this horrible soundtrack the movie had. For me, the movie is just a big no-go. I think they should have never touched this subject. I mean, the book by Michael Monaghan isn't the best either. We all know that. They simply should have left this movie, this idea somewhere in a can and hide it away and be done with it. I mean, that's my honest opinion about the movie. I mean, especially if you're an outsider, I have no clue about black metal and are watching this. I mean, what the hell are you going to think about the Norwegians?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my major criticisms about the scene as a whole is the media coverage from the outside. I mean, we as insiders know about the scene and know about the music and the individuals behind it. But I mean, from an outside perspective, it must seem like black metal or Norwegian black metal is a whole of church burning Satanists who like to murder each other. And the movie didn't help that.
No.
After all, the only thing it did was confirm this kind of wrong picture that the press has printed.
And make a parody out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is a good summary for the movie. It's a dreadful parody.
It is.
Lacking everything essential about black metal, and the few bands that are kind of touched upon in this movie. I mean, there's so much more to Norwegian black metal, and there are so many documentaries way better than Laws of Chaos. For me, it's just a big no-go. I'm not going to watch it again, and yeah.
And I actually forgot to bring this up too. If you're gonna do a film about the Norwegian scene, at least have people play the other band members, and focus on others. Where was Emperor? Where was Dark Throne? Where was Immortal? Where was Enslaved? Where was Satyricon? Where was Gorgoroth? They only focused on Mayhem and Burzum.
No.
Yeah.
They only focused on Emperor on one specific event. The murder.
With Faust.
Yeah, Faust, Lillehammer.
But
And
yes.
And another criticism. I mean, if I'm a Swedish movie director shooting this kind of movie, and I mean, Swedish and Norwegian isn't that far apart. Why not cast Norwegian actors and shoot it in Norwegian? That would have been a lot more authentic. I mean, look at what Netflix is doing. For example, if they are shooting a German TV series or an Indian or a Norwegian, of course it's always shot in the original but dubbed over.
Yeah.
And I mean, they could have done that.
Or at least, or at the very least, have the actors try and talk in Norwegian accents.
Americans talking with Norwegian accent. Not a good
God.
Unless, if the actors are good, then fine, but if they can't do it, then don't.
Well, the only way they could is if they are descendants from Norwegian and they learn from their parents. That'll probably be the only way they could. But as far as an pure American doing Norwegian, it just sounds horrible.
Yep. I mean, they should have left the script somewhere.
I agree. I just think they should have just left pure fucking mayhem with that documentary explaining everything and just leave it at that.
Or Until the Light Takes Us as well.
Yeah.
I actually have had this thought in my mind. If only this movie was more based off of Until the Light Takes Us and pure fucking mayhem, no doubt in my mind I felt the movie would have been so much better if they had based it off of those two films instead of the movie.
Personally, my opinion, no movie at all. Leave the scene as it be. In my opinion, black metal is one of those subjects that simply should be left alone by the media, at least outside media. I mean, Media Connect that is kind of into this black metal scene. It's fine, but outside media, they would only misprint everything and paint a totally wrong picture of the scene. And I mean, the movie did that. And I'm very skeptical towards outside media coverage of the black metal scene. I mean, documentaries. If you listen to black metal and shoot a black metal documentary and are true, and don't misquote, it's fine. But not like this.
No.
Another one of the examples of what you said, Hannah, and I agree 100%. Was the Kerrang, the infamous Kerrang interview, and how misquoted it was. I mean,
even if you take the metal media coverage, lots of those underground subgenres are even misquoted and misprinted and misportrayed by metal magazines. Just look at Metal Injection, Kerrang, or the Metal Hammer, or whatever the big media outlets of the scene. Even they misquote and misprint a lot.
Even most recently, metalsucks.net. I mean, still to this day, and if they're here, here's what I say: fuck you, you SJW cunts. They have always misrepresented the musicians that they don't like. Blackie Lawless, because he wanted to make a political statement which was against their own, shit on Blackie Lawless. Inquisition, since he was acquitted of, unfortunately, pedophile or child pornography as such, they only broadcast the prosecution and they don't broadcast the defendant's case. Destroyer 666 Destroyer 666 was also mispronounced by Metal Sucks, and what happened? They sued Metal Sucks and they won. So here's the thing. Metal Sucks, if you don't want to talk about metal, and if you say metal sucks, then fuck you. You don't need to do anything else. I mean, Metal Injection still does metal.
I mean,
Metal
just
Injection
leave
still
the
does
scene alone. I mean, if you have no clue about certain subjects, and certainly black metal is a very complex subject that you need to be familiar with to make a statement about it. I mean,
Or
if you have no idea about it, simply leave it alone.
Or better yet, if you're called metal.
Or if you want to use it just to shit on artists that have a different political point of view than yours, then fuck off. I mean,
I agree.
Metal Injection still does metal some good. Loudwire still does some good. I mean, I still enjoy some of those Wikipedia fatter fiction.
Oh yeah, those are
artists.
fun.
Yeah.
But still, Metal Injection still does some good. Loudwire still does some good. Kerrang, Metal Hammer, Terrorizer still does some good as well.
It's okay. It depends on the scene they are covering in the bands.
Yeah. But as I said, they still do some. I don't say that they're 100%. But if you want to use just to shit on bands that you don't like, then here's my message to Metal Sucks: get the fuck out.
Oh, I agree. Just delete. I'll just say this: just delete your YouTube. Don't listen to metal again, and go fuck yourselves.
I mean, it might be a bit off topic, but like out of all those like YouTube metal medias, the only one that I like is Loudwire because they do a lot of different stuff. The one thing I liked that Metal Injection did, apart from Rob because he's cool, was the Taste of Metal show with Chef Brian Sal. That was cool. I wish they would bring that back because that was a fun show. But other than that, I don't care for Metal Injection. Metal sucks. Blech.
Just delete your YouTube.
I think that the only one that still did the scene proud, and I'm not ashamed to say, at least he got us all together, was Sam Dunn. And he's still doing
banger.
He is respectful towards all the scenes.
And he did all his research.
Despite the first time that he met Necro Butcher, that was
Necro Butcher was.
I got a comment. Fuck you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then again,
and then who would have thought? And then who would have thought? Yeah, who would have thought 9 years later they kissed and made up?
Yeah. Well, Necro admitted that he was drunk, and he said
and
he even asked,
like, I had no idea.
and he asked himself, "Who is this weird young guy like trying to shake my hand?"
Project?
Is it a school project?
And now they're friends. Now they're friends, which is cool.
Yeah. And he's like.
And then one other thing, when it comes to like outside media, stereotyping black metal as all evil people that burn churches down and kill each other. You gotta understand. Yeah, you gotta understand. There are a ton of people in the Norwegian scene that are cool, funny, nice people, like Fenris, for example. He's
what
so
is
respectful.
the more recognizable meme about black metal? Black metal cats.
But-
and you have to take into consideration that not only a fraction of the musicians in the scenes are Satanists. A lot of them are either atheists or very moderate Christians or whatever.
Yeah.
Pagans or
Yeah.
full-on pagans.
And a lot of pagans. And I mean, only a fraction about the band sing about Satanism. A lot of them sing about nature, Norse mythology,
Vikings,
even social,
snow.
political commentary, folklore, and so on. I mean, black metal is so much more than just church-burning maniacs running
Yeah, it
around
is.
stabbing gay men in Lillehammer. Yes.
Of course. And it's like
But-
the saying goes, you don't have to be satanic to listen to the music or even create the music. It's just entertainment.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess.
And on top of that, like, to finish up my point, yeah, look no further than people like Fenris, who is very well respectful, wise, smart, intelligent, and even Abath with his comedic charms. There are so many people within that scene that are cool people that just live their lives like a normal person should. You know, the crazy people like Varg and Faust, yeah, keep them away from us, but everyone else,
Yeah.
that's fine. Don't worry about it and such. But one last thing about Lords of Chaos I wanted to say. The one positive I have about Lords of Chaos, Dead's portrayal, in my opinion, was the most accurate out of them all. For the most part. Like, with his depressive demeanor, with all the shit he did, even though the cats thing, yeah, that was the one big no-no.
No,
But
that
everything
never
else,
happened.
but everything else was pretty well done as far as Dead is concerned. That would be the one big positive. The only reasons I ever go back to watch the movie more is just for the sheer disaster of it, because sometimes I like watching disaster type movies because of just the shitty ineptitude of it. But like I said, the movie is so bad it's good. It's in that category where it's, to me, I don't feel ashamed watching it. I like watching it because of the fact it's bad. Which is weird to say, but it's the truth. It's kind of like, to use a metaphor from pro wrestling, the Dungeon of Doom in WCW was arguably one of the worst things to ever happen in wrestling, but it's so bad, it's entertaining and good.
No, the dead
Because-
Oh, yeah.
Master.
Oh, God.
Oh,
Or creating the Zodiac. Really?
Yeah.
I guess it's my turn to put my 2
Now
cents
it's your
into
turn
the
to
movie.
weigh in to Lords of
Do
Chaos.
it.
Okay. First of all, I want to say 2 things. First, I respect Jonas Ackerlund for what he did with the contributions for black metal. First thing. Second thing. Me, as a person who loves horror movies, one of my biggest dreams was to direct, write, or even produce a horror/thriller movie. When Lords of Chaos came out in theaters, I saw it twice. Once as a movie lover, second as a metalhead, as a person that loves black metal. Okay, here's where there are things that I like about the movie. That's portrayed. The portrayal of Dead by Jack Hiller. He almost got the character almost perfect. There were 1 or 2 things that I didn't like, but he almost got it perfect. I like this. Is probably me, since I have the DVD. At the beginning of the movie, you see Roy Culligan playing Euronymous. At the back of the background, you see all the metal posters. One of them is the Halloween poster, the original Halloween, with the knife in the back, which is kind of a bit of a foreshadowing for what happens later. And that poster comes up again in Helveta when Faust is watching an Evil Dead movie. You see the poster in front of him. So in other words, a foreshadowing him doing the stabbing, and for Euronymous being stabbed in the back. I thought that was truly genius of Jonas Ackerlund. Now here's the bad thing. First of all, Euronymous never had a girlfriend. Guy,
Or
the
none that
actress
we knew of. Or
No.
none that we knew
that we knew of, the actress that portrayed Anna Marie, I think that was her name. I don't know.
Yeah, Anne Marie.
Anne Marie, not the greatest actress. The portrayal of Varg, Fat Varg, come on, Fat Varg, really?
What is Mark Fat? He's like a stick figure.
The accuracy
Even,
of the
even
events.
Italian wasn't that fat.
No, not even metal. The accuracy of the events. After the fan top church, you see in the movie doing like 10 other churches when in fact it was basically just 2 more and then it did all the rest. The accuracy of the movie. The soundtrack. They didn't have any original songs by neither Dark Throne, Emperor, Immortal, Over, all of the Norwegian black metal bands.
There was only one. There was only one.
Yeah.
There was only one that made the cut, and that was Funeral Fog.
Most of the music was played by Sigur Rós, which is an indie rock.
From Iceland.
Yeah, but there's some things that I kind of find funny. At the beginning of the movie, they had Hades by Bastard played in the movie, which I'm like, Jonas, you son of a bitch. I love Hades. You had
That is
also
a good song.
you had also songs by Sodom from the infamous in the EP,
In the Sign of Evil.
yeah, in the Sunday of EP, you had the songs, so that's I gave him credit for that.
Yeah, Dio, except
Dio except Scorpions. Come on, that they made
Sarcophago even was in the movie.
They made Varg look like a total poser. That's the thing that I hated. Varg making him a poser when Varg was one of the most influential figures in the Norwegian black metal scene. They made him look like a fucking poser. That's the thing that
one of the more intellectual.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Varg. I might hate Varg for a lot of things. I have to admit, he's one of the smartest persons I've seen in interviews, even in readings and all that. One more thing, the final scene. Euronymous' hair. Jonas Ackerland had access to the police reports. There was a photo that he saw from the police report that no one has seen in years. It's not on the internet. You're not gonna find it anywhere. That has Euronymous' haircut short. Varg disagrees because he says after stabbing him in the skull, the autopsy people had to cut his hair so they could see the scars and all that. And in the interview right here in the Metal Hammer, Jonas Ackerland describes that the photo made a change to the movie because you see at the very end he's trying to let everything go from the past, trying to look for a brighter future in the movie. And also he wanted to humanize his characters, which I understand why they try to do it, because a lot of people portray them as monsters, Varg, Euronymous, and all that. I understand that point for Jonas Ackerland. In terms of the movie or recommendation, I would not recommend this to anyone who's trying to get into the black metal scene. No one who's trying to get into the black metal scene. Once you already are familiar with the scene, familiar with the bands, the songs, the history, you can go watch the movie for entertaining purpose. I see this movie. I saw this movie for this show, for this episode, 10 times. Just to get the feel of the movie and talk about this movie. If you want to see something authentic, go watch Until the Light Takes Us documentary. Go watch...
Or Pure Fucking Mayhem.
Pure Fucking Mayhem.
Yeah, fucking mayhem.
Or even go watch some of Sam Dunn's episodes in the Metal Evolution. Go watch some of Sam Dunn's, talks about black metal. It's better for you to watch that and watch this movie that should have never seen never come out to the public, and it just bastardized the scene for Satanists.
Yeah.
Which that brings me another thing. Who the fuck was the guy playing Hell Satan and doing the Nazi salute? I never found out who that guy portrayed. Because I found out who Fenris was in the movie, but in a deleted scene. But said no Ishan, no Immortal. That's the thing that pissed me off the most. They focus just on Varg and Euronymous and ignore the rest.
Yeah.
And even the mentions to the Nocturnal Fenris to Attila Animal. They only focused on that.
True.
Yeah.
And if I would have made a movie based on Norwegian, I would at least have the original bands with their music, or have a few of them with their consents. Do cameos, maybe.
I don't know about that.
Difficult.
No.
Uh,
Or just have them, yeah. Or have them play the movie originally. But that would have been difficult as well. But out of all that movie, come on, why would you add a fat Varg? Varg was literally the most skinniest man you could ever see in your life. Or Musk.
Yeah, and on top of that, a Jewish actor, which Varg absolutely hates.
Mm-hmm.
So
If Varg's, I'm pretty sure Varg sees that movie, he probably would have killed the director and the producer. And it says,
now here's the thing I want to mention about Varg. I've seen his videos ranting about the movie. He kept on saying like he never went to the press to admit anything. But yet, in Until the Light Takes Us, he says that he talked to the press and said how we were responsible for the church burning. It's like he contradicted himself.
Yeah, I remember.
Varg is Varg.
I remember.
Yeah.
Jonas Ackerman took that same title from this book, the infamous Black Metal Bible.
yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah. And
Yeah, but if you look up who Michael Monaghan truly is, I mean, he is like the yellow press journalist of Norway.
Not to mention that Lords of Chaos, it was not about mayhem, or the name did not come from mayhem. It eventually came from a gang in the States. I think it was either from a gang in the States or from a band in the States called Lords of Chaos. Mayhem never called themselves Lords of Chaos.
Never.
And I mean, the book talks about so much more than just mayhem. I mean, it talks also about the crimes that happened here in Germany,
England, Sweden. That I like about the book. It talks about the crimes after the Norwegian black metal scene and the history of the scene. The one thing I can say about the book that I didn't like, the fucking Nazism thing. Come on,
it was only Varg.
It was only Varg.
Nobody else.
That's the thing that I didn't like.
And on top of that, and then another part, like the whole scenes where they're talking and ranting about death metal bands, and like Varg talking about over the years about his disdain for death metal. Yet I seen an interview with Varg where he says he was a fan of Deicide and Pestilence. Are you a fan of death metal, or are you not? Varg.
Yeah, but Varg is Varg.
Question.
Varg is Varg.
Varg contradicts himself constantly.
Yeah. From paganism to Nazism to socialism to fascism, he's all over the board. He's all over the board.
I mean, just as it suits him. I mean,
it's like if only there was a way for like Euronymous' evil spirit to come around and actually tell some shit. Maybe we could get a little more understanding about things. But since we only have Varg, and you don't ever know what Varg says is true nowadays or not.
True.
That's the thing. That was the missing piece in the whole story. We never got the side of Euronymous, and we never will, unfortunately.
Nope.
And not only that, the black metal scene tends to be very close-knit, very close. The only people that know of that story, they are the only ones that experienced the story in the first place. They were really there. And to share it with outsiders, they would not do that on a constant basis.
Yeah.
I think it's better that way.
Yeah, because it is true that everything that happened was awful, but at least we can focus on one good thing. Not the movie itself, because the movie is shit and will forever be shit. But at least we got this scene that kick-started possibly one of the branches for what would become extreme metal. I mean, what we consider today extreme metal, black metal, the Florida death scene, and
grindcore.
Doom.
Yeah,
Doom.
Thrash.
The three pillars. Thrash was its own genre, but what they consider more extreme metal was black, was the Florida death metal scene in the early stages before it became global, and the early British grindcore scene as well. So at least we have one more genre, which is a genre that all of us like, some more than others, but nevertheless, despite the movie, despite what happens, and despite the stories that we'll never truly get to know because we were never a part of that scene, and I'm pretty sure that if we get in touch with Necro Butcher, with Hellhammer, or they will just ask us, Fenris, Nocturno, and all those other guys, they'll probably ask us, please, let us not talk about that because it's not
It's
a
private.
very comfortable
private.
subject to talk about.
And it was the worst days of their lives.
That's the thing that Fenris at the very end of the documentary said. It's everyone's property now. He always wanted it to be this little secluded thing. Now everyone can listen to it. Now everybody knows about it.
And what a way to end off. So in the end, Lords of Chaos, don't recommend it if you're watching it for the story, if you're thinking you're going to see an accurate story. As a horror movie, if you're an outsider that knows nothing about the scene and don't want to get into the scene but just
Don't
watch
watch
it as a
it.
horror movie,
Don't
unless
watch
you're
it.
crazy like me, then still
Don't
don't.
watch
I
it.
only will watch
Don't
it
watch it.
again just for the mere shittiness of it because I'm crazy like that.
Well, here's the thing.
But in the end, the whole scene's still thriving well. There hasn't been really any controversy since '93. And
No, not
bands
really.
that are still going strong. The only one that's missing is Emperor, but we've already talked about that. So, at the end, black metal is just a style that's not overly
Artur said his phone
satanic.
died.
It's everywhere. And so, with that said, that wraps it up for episode 30.
Well, one thing.
What a day.
If you're gonna get into black metal, do not start by watching the movie.
No.
Nah.
Watch
Either
documentaries.
Watch the documentaries and
Listen
listen
to
to the
albums.
to the albums. That's the important thing. Listen to the albums. All the albums that we mentioned, highly recommended. Even Philosophem, unfortunately, but it's part of the history.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's it for episode 30. We got so many episodes planned up going forward for the next several months. The next one, Hannah's gonna love this.
Oh, fuck
Top
it.
10 ghost
Ghost
songs.
songs.
Oh
And
god.
after that, top 10 albums of the 2000s.
2000s, which that's gonna be good.
Oh god.
And
That's
so
gonna be
many more.
That's so many.
forward. But anyways, thank you for watching the premiere stream, and thank you for leaving your comments. We'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks for episode 31, Top 10 Ghost Songs, and we'll see you later. But the focal point of this video is to figure out the mindset of some of these smart marks out here who are hating on Sasha, but yet over a year ago loved him when Neville left, or loved him whenever he was sticking up for himself and wanting to quit WWE, but hating on Sasha and or Bayley for doing the exact same thing. one word to describe you guys, and that's hypocrite. You people wanted Seth Rollins to be the guy for WWE. Now that he is the guy, you don't want him to be the guy anymore. Make up your fucking minds, wrestling fans.